there is another set of positive messaging coming from the U.S. ambassador, where the U.S. ambassador basically said, technically she said the U.S. applauded TNT for its religious freedom as one of the most religiously diverse and tolerant countries in the world. And I think it's interesting that you said that because I assume it mirrors my own observation. I haven't been to the States that often, but between the few times that I've went to the States and to Canada, and then, of course, you consume foreign media, so you get a certain sense of how politics and ideology goes on there. But I did get a sense in the States when I was there on the ground, in New York, of very diversity, right? And maybe this is where London is more, integrated than New York. Everybody was sectioned off. Everybody had their place, and they didn't necessarily move beyond their place. And I'm assuming the U.S. ambassador is taking note of the fact that, look, to some extent, you're going to see the cultures and the races mixed up, not just, we have it in the borders, but now within the various cities and boroughs, it's mixed up.
Candace Bond, the relatively new U.S. ambassador, addressing the Muslim brethren gathered at the Masjid Al Tawbah in Lowlands Tobago. Again, I appreciate the messaging. I think that it certainly is something that we are to reflect on because, in my opinion, London is the most cosmopolitan society or city in the entire world. But it's not necessarily the most tolerant. And this is why I keep asking myself, are we becoming more liberal or are we becoming more intolerant, which is why there is a separation. There's a fight for liberal ideas and liberal ideology, but that in itself is causing a separation. So what really is it? The fact is, Trinidad and Tobago is racially diverse and religiously diverse. But even so, there is a lot of division. There is division in the church. Yeah. Amongst members of the congregation. And not necessarily because of religious belief. I'm here. I'm a good Christian. I'm in church. I'm praying to God. And it's the same. It could be the same thing in a mosque. It could be the same thing in a temple. There is a division or separation because of ideology.
With regards to the Roman Catholic Church, all I'll say is this. The irony, of course, with religion being something that has to be ultimately personal because you have to believe it, right? And you can't force somebody to believe in something. Do they really believe it then? Yes or no? There's this whole debate about or concept of free will and why we were put on earth to love God. But, if you could just force somebody to love God, then why would God give us free will in the first place? So a whole philosophical thing. But I think what the consequence of that we don't necessarily realize is people are free to interpret it to some extent how they want to. And then they make the mistake of judging others based on, are you in line with my interpretation? And then, of course, now religions on a whole, this is one thing that I found very, very odd. Technically speaking, once I believe in a religion, I am by default saying I believe that all other religions are false. Right? Just technically speaking, there's no other way about it. I can't say I believe that there is one God, but I also think that these other beliefs with these other gods exist. That doesn't work. Now, am I about to go and have a fight with somebody over it? Or I'm not even necessarily wanting to say that I believe in this and that is false. It's a weird spot that the concept of religion has, where no matter how well-meaning you are, that technicality just always exists. And it's interesting to see it play out on various levels.
I enjoy having conversations on such topics such as religion and such as race and the perception of religion and the perception of race, because if I were to focus on Trinidad and Tobago, and I think the U.S. ambassador is right from one sense, we are religiously tolerant from the fact that we have a public holiday that recognizes the celebration or the most significant event for any religious institution or any religious belief. For example, we just had Easter weekend.
Yes.
Right. We have Ramadan coming up. Right. Hindu Christmas, spiritual shelter Baptist, etc. I think the issue is, as much as there are holidays that recognize that diversity, as a society, we are not religiously tolerant. Maybe you can go to church and practice your faith, or I can go to church or temple or mosque and practice my faith. That does not necessarily mean that we are tolerant of one another. Because outside on the streets, it's one thing. There's still that separation that you see in New York. That separation also exists here in TNT. And I think the major issue for me is that at what point in time do we understand and do we recognize that, listen, I cannot, based off of your religious beliefs, if I were to question your religious beliefs or you were to question mine, if I were to ask questions or try and analyze it, or say, I don't believe in what you believe in, but I respect you, that's one thing. But people cannot even openly express their thoughts, their opinions on religion without somebody saying, that's disrespectful, without somebody saying, that's blasphemous.
So and therein, that's a whole other debate that's been going on to some extent in the States, in Canada, in England, not so much the rest of Europe, though, I think, but potentially the rest of Europe, in the sense that, look, how do we have important conversations and express important ideas, but we have to not offend anybody, right? And we can't risk offending anybody, so it all has to be politically correct. But then at some point, then you can't have important conversations, because think about it, there's a reason why people say don't talk about politics or religion in certain situations, right? Because it will just get contested, because different interpretations, again, will clash at the end of the day. You could be of the same religion and potentially different interpretations could clash, and of course, don't talk about different religions and different political, ideological beliefs on various issues. But I think with regards to religion itself, you're right. I remember I was invited to Diwali celebrations. I won't say where, because I don't want to reveal the church that was next door.
Or be offensive.
Right?
Yeah.
And the church that was next door decided to have like a Eucharistic, not Eucharistic, sorry. Basically just have a session. This was a weekday.
So
right?
a prayer meeting, you can assume.
A praise and worship session, right? Very loudly, very loudly. And I took it upon myself to leave the Diwali celebrations, of which I was a spectator, right? But, just, observing. Go down there just to see what was going on. It wasn't a congregation. It was just the band. It was just like a handful of people. And I'm very certain you don't just have a handful of people come out full tilt to sing songs and beat the drum on a random day in the week, right? Maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is what they do every other Tuesday, but it felt to me as though their only objective was to just be disruptive for what was going on next door. And it bothered me a lot.
I'm glad you raised that, and this is my final point on this issue. You can say you're a good Christian. You can say you're a good Hindu. What makes you a good Christian, a good Hindu, a good Muslim, a good Shouter Baptist, a good Catholic, whatever your faith or belief is, it's not going to church or going to temple or going to mosque for every single event. It's not being there every Sunday, every Friday evening, every Saturday night. It's not even a matter of having to donate my wealth to the church. I have seen people who will go to every single celebration involved in their religious belief or faith. I have seen people who will donate endlessly to the temple, to the church, or to the mosque. I have seen that happening. But as soon as they step out, they don't even practice. So they're not even necessarily a good person or a good citizen. But in their mindset, being a member of the congregation is me being a good Hindu or good Christian. They will give everything. Clothes, money. Oh, you have some people that believe that passing all the money to the church is everything. But they walk out onto the street and hesitate to give $1 to a man on the road who is asking for a meal.
Or give him a meal if you don't want to give him cash.
Their thing is, right, give them a meal. Their thing is that he going to take that dollar and buy drugs. Even if that's the case, that's on him, man.
Yeah.
Give him a meal if you want. But this is my point. You are not necessarily a good Christian, and let me stress this very carefully. You are not necessarily a good Christian, Hindu, Muslim, whatever, by you sitting in a congregation.
Yeah.
It's what you practice outside that matters a lot. It's your way of life, and especially how you treat yourself and how you treat others.
There's a lot more I could say. I'll just say this to wrap it up, folks. There are reasons why people get disillusioned with whatever religious organization they get this, or faith they get disillusioned from. And part of it is behavior like this. Now, it might not be expressed exactly in the way that Ketan just said, but when you get down to it, when you get down to how people utilize their interpretation of what is to be a good practicing member of their faith, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this in your lives, when it turns other people off, particularly the young people that all faiths want to attract in order to keep their faith, going strong, ask yourselves, is this really what it means to be good at my faith?